Douluo, Martial Soul Asura Sword, Supreme Killing God Chapter 71 Taking control of the killing capital. The new King of Slaughter. The palace of the King of Slaughter is located in the heart of the inner city. It resembles an ancient castle entirely black, exuding an eerie atmosphere. At the entrance of the main hall, 2 rows of black-armored knights, each wielding a heavy sword, stood silently. At this moment, Su Mo and the captain of the enforcement team walked over one after the other. The lead black-armored knight turned his head upon hearing the sound. When he saw the law enforcement team leader, his clothes were tattered and he was covered in blood. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes and he hurriedly stepped forward. Blood Wolf, how did you get injured? Blood Wolf is the captain of the law enforcement team. I'm fine. Blood Wolf shook his head, then looked at Su Mo. From now on, this man will be the new King of Slaughter. As soon as Blood Wolf finished speaking, all the black-armored knights present turned their gazes to Su Mo. Their eyes held surprise, confusion, and above all, disbelief. What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and pay homage to the great king. Blood Wolf frowned and shouted in a deep voice. In an instant, the armor rattled and the black-armored knights knelt down on one knee, heads buried deep, right fists pressed against their left chests. Greetings, Lord of Slaughter. Blood Wolf's status is second only to the King of Slaughter. Even he has bowed down to him, so these little minions naturally dared not say anything. Up, Su Mo said calmly. He then strode into the palace with Blood Wolf following closely behind. Before long, the two entered the main hall. The main hall was dark and spacious. Directly above was a huge throne which looked like it was carved from a single giant stone. King, please. Blood Wolf bowed deeply, speaking with a fawning expression. Su Mo walked straight to the throne. He paused for a moment before the throne, then turned and sat down. The throne was somewhat cold and hard. Blood Wolf, tell me about your current situation. Great King. Currently, the enforcement team consists of 5 members besides me, all of whom are Contra Masters, with the strongest being level 86 in addition. There are approximately 600 black armor knights in total. Each enforcer commands 100 black armor knights, who patrol the inner city in their respective areas, while the remaining black armor knights are stationed at the royal palace. Su Mo nodded slightly. 600 people, that's not a large number. However, in the killing city where soul skills are forbidden, a well-trained team is enough to suppress the vast majority of the fallen. Moreover, the 5 squad leaders are not only soul masters themselves, but also possess the right to use soul skills granted by the King of Slaughter. No one can escape from the city of Slaughter from their grasp. Just as Su Mo was about to speak, light footsteps came from the palace door. Soon, a woman entered the main hall. It was the same guide who had previously received Su Mo. She wasn't wearing a black veil at the moment. Her features were delicate, and her appearance was quite good. Her expression froze the moment she saw who was sitting on the throne. Lord Blood Wolf, why is Shura here? Where is the great king? Her gaze swept quickly between Su Mo and Blood Wolf. Blood Wolf turned around. The previous King of Slaughter is dead. Now Lord Shura is the new King of Slaughter. The guide's pupils contracted sharply. The King of Slaughter is dead. She knew the King of Slaughter's strength all too well. How could he possibly die? But Blood Wolf's status is second only to the King of Slaughter, and even he said so she had no choice but to believe it. Immediately afterward, a sense of unease welled up in her heart. She was the most favored woman of the King of Slaughter, and this favor was her greatest asset in the city of Slaughter. But now her backer had fallen. What are you standing there for? Hurry up and pay your respects to the great king. The sound of Blood Wolf pulled the guide back from her daze. The guide suddenly came to her senses, her legs went weak and she knelt on the ground. Your subordinate has seen the great king. Up. Su Mo's voice came from above, revealing neither joy nor anger. The guide stood up tremblingly, head bowed, not daring to glance at the throne. The hall fell silent for a moment. Blood Wolf. Su Mo's voice rang out again. Your subordinate is here. Do you want to be the King of Slaughter? Blood Wolf's expression changed drastically in an instant. With a thud, he knelt down, his forehead almost touching the ground. Great King, your subordinate has no such thoughts. You are the true king of the city of Slaughter. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. He thought Su Mo was going to settle scores with him. After all, he had attacked Su Mo not long ago. Are you misunderstanding something? Blood Wolf cautiously raised his head, his eyes filled with confusion. Su Mo stood up and looked down at Blood Wolf. I won't stay in the killing city forever. I need someone to manage this place for me. As for how you manage it, I won't interfere. I have only one request. All rules must remain unchanged and the corrupt must not be allowed to escape the city of Slaughter and wreak havoc on the outside world. Blood Wolf's pupils slowly dilated. What, you don't want to? Blood Wolf snapped out of his daze of surprise. Your subordinate is willing, great king. Your subordinate will certainly keep the killing city in good order for you. I will never let the fallen ones set foot outside this place. Very good. Su Mo nodded slightly. I have important matters to attend to now, so I will leave the management of the killing city to you. As Su Mo spoke, a small blood-red sword mark lit up between his brows. At the same time, a dark red vortex suddenly appeared in the darkness above the hall. The Asura secret realm is located within the royal palace of the city of Slaughter, and its passage can only be opened through the inheritance mark. Su Mo lightly touched the ground with his toes and his body disappeared into the vortex. The vortex closed and disappeared. The main hall returned to silence. Blood Wolf stood there, head tilted back, staring blankly at the spot where the vortex had disappeared. He didn't know what it was and he didn't want to know. All he knew was that he was now the king of slaughter. He walked step by step up the high platform and sat on the throne. His hands greedily caressed the armrests as he looked around, his face filled with intense ecstasy. Everything here was his now. After stroking them for a moment, he looked down at the guide standing below and his expression of ecstasy instantly turned into one of lewdness. The guide was the woman of the previous king of slaughter, and she had an excellent figure and appearance. He certainly had other thoughts about the guide, but due to the power of the king of slaughter he could only put aside those unrealistic ideas. But now he was the king of slaughter and he could finally taste the life of a guide. Come over. Yes, Lord Blood Wolf. The guide dared not resist in the slightest. On the contrary, she was secretly pleased. For her, living in a city of slaughter, clinging to the strong was instinctive. The king of slaughter was dead. Blood Wolf was now the new king of slaughter. As long as she served Blood Wolf well, nothing would change for her. Soon the guide knelt at Blood Wolf's feet, her eyes sparkling with a seductive allure. Blood Wolf stretched out a hand, pinched the guide's chin and licked his lips. Haha, not bad, you know what I mean, hurry up. At this moment Blood Wolf was already extremely hungry and thirsty. Yes, sir. Guide skillfully lowered her head, her fingertips deftly reaching for Blood Wolf's waist. Chapter 72: The Asura's Secret Realm, the Second Trial of Asura. The Asura Realm. As the feeling of weightlessness dissipated, the scene before Sumo's eyes suddenly changed. A faint red mist drifted in the wind, enveloping the surrounding fields. Beneath his feet lay cracked, black earth, littered with broken swords, shattered spears, and withered bones. A scene of utter devastation resembling an ancient battlefield. Above the sky a scarlet blood moon hung high, its cold red light pouring down, dyeing the entire world a suffocating dark red. Pitch-black road led straight down beneath the blood moon. Beneath the blood moon, the red mist was so thick that it was impossible to see anything within. Sumo tried to probe with his spiritual power but was completely blocked by the red mist, so he had to give up. Then he stepped forward. He had only been gone for a few moments. The surrounding red mist surged and twisted violently, and countless remnant souls condensed from the mist to take shape. They roared and charged madly at Sumo. Carrying an aura of endless ferocity, Sumo frowned slightly, and a red light suddenly appeared in his palm as the Asura Demon Sword materialized. With a flick of his wrist, a crescent-shaped crimson sword aura slashed through the air, fierce and unparalleled, covering an extremely wide area. These remnant souls were only at the soul elder level and they couldn't withstand the power of his sword at all. As the sword energy swept past, all the remnant souls in the sky were annihilated. Immediately, countless strands of crimson energy surged out from where the remnant souls had dissipated and entered Sumo's body. This is murderous intent, he murmured. He felt a sudden surge of murderous intent within him, but fortunately it was still within a controllable range. After a moment of contemplation, he continued walking along the ancient path for several dozen meters. The crimson mist surged once more, and a new batch of remnant souls condensed, their aura stronger than before but their numbers significantly reduced. Sumo cleared away the remnant souls once more, but the murderous aura that surged in was even more violent, almost causing him to lose control on the spot. I see. Sumo instantly understood the requirements of the second trial of Asura. He needed to keep going along this road until it ended. Along the way, remnant souls would continuously appear, their strength increasing layer by layer, and he must constantly kill them. With each killing, an even greater surge of killing intent would flow into his body. He needed to stay true to himself amidst endless slaughter and not be corrupted by the murderous aura. After all, if one could not even control their killing intent and their mind was corrupted, they were only fit to become a killing machine, let alone become a god of slaughter and judgment. Sumo immediately sat cross-legged, calmed his mind, and forcibly suppressed the surging killing intent within his body. Time flew and he did not know how much time had passed. Here the sky was always blood red and time seemed to lose its meaning. It might have been 3 months or it might have been 6 months. Sumo had already traveled more than half the distance, slaying countless remnant souls, and his killing intent had surged several times over. Previously, he could suppress it by willpower alone. However, over time, the murderous aura became too immense to be suppressed by willpower alone. At this moment, his aura was chilling and bone-chilling. His body trembled slightly, and the murderous intent accumulated within him was uncontrollably overflowing outward. And in Sumo's spiritual sea, he stood facing a figure who looked exactly like him, swords in hand. The difference was that the figure had bloodshot eyes, white hair, and exuded a violent aura. The two had been locked in combat for quite some time. They were like 2 peas in a pod. Their moves, soul skills, and even the faint divine power within their bodies were completely identical. The only difference was that the white-haired Sumo was entirely formed from the will to kill. Judging from the killing intent Sumo had accumulated so far, the white-haired Sumo's strength was slightly higher than his. Therefore, Sumo was already showing signs of weakness at this moment. Once he was defeated by the white-haired Sumo, his will would be completely replaced by the other party, his mind would be eroded by the killing intent, and he would eventually become a killing machine. At this moment, the white-haired sumo wore a lazy and unrestrained smile and spoke in a seductive tone. Why do you have to suppress your murderous intent so painstakingly? Enjoy the killing, embrace the killing, put down those pointless shackles. Rules and order are nothing but excuses for your self-comfort. I am you and you are me. Let me take your place. At that time you will have the power to crush everything and you can kill whomever you want in this world. Sumo did not answer but stared at the white-haired sumo. Suddenly, Sumo smiled. You're right, I have indeed enjoyed killing, that thrill, that sense of power. I've never denied it, but you've got one thing wrong. What I enjoy is not the killing itself, but bringing those who deserve to die to justice and making evil pay the price. Your killing intent born from murderous intent. You only see the pleasure of killing, but you don't know why I kill. He raised the spiritual sword in his hand and said in a deep voice, I do crave power, but I will never become a slave to power. Instead, I will become its master, and I am your master. He understood now that what the white-haired sumo said was indeed true. Killing intent did not necessarily have to be suppressed. Instead, he should take control of it and make it his own power. Just like a continuous flood, simply trying to block it would only lead to a more violent breach. Killing intent was not a shackle or a burden, but rather the power of Asura. It should not be forcibly confined within the body, but should be transformed into his own power. This was the way of killing. Suddenly, a murderous aura surged from Sumo's body, and a huge Asura phantom appeared behind him as if shattering the void, wielding the same greatsword. The murderous aura that was originally meant to devour him flowed like rivers into the sea, all converging on the giant sword in the Asura phantom's hand. Sumo raised his sword above his head. The phantom of Asura moved in perfect sync with him. The next moment, Sumo swung his sword down. The phantom of Asura behind him also slashed down, the giant sword carrying an overwhelming killing intent. The white-haired Sumo tried to resist, but it was all in vain. This blow shattered the sword in his hand. His body suddenly froze. Sumo said calmly, You are just a part of me. Now it's time for you to come back. White-haired Sumo's body began to disintegrate, turning into countless blood-red light spots, all of which fed back to Sumo. The sea of the mind returned to calm. Inside the Asura secret realm, Sumo opened his eyes. The murderous aura that had been radiating wildly around him suddenly subsided and returned to silence. It didn't disappear, it was completely brought under control. At this moment, Sumo showed no murderous intent whatsoever, as if he were someone who had never been tainted by blood. This move is called Heart Slayer. Heart Slayer, meant to sever the inner demons formed by the will to kill. The more killing intent used in this move, the stronger its power. If Sumo were to unleash his full killing intent, even an ordinary titled Douluo would find it difficult to withstand it. Soon, Sumo continued forward. Along the way, the number of remnant souls decreased, but their strength steadily increased. But even the strongest were only at the contra level. At this stage, slaying remnant souls was not the core objective. Mastering killing intent and tempering one's mindset were the key points. Therefore, those remnant souls were not powerful enough to be difficult to deal with. Half an hour later, he finally arrived deep within the red mist. A dark red palace stood before him, its gates tightly shut. Sumo walked to the door and tried to push it open, but the door did not budge. Even when he used all his strength, it was still to no avail. It must be that my current progress in the divine examination is still too shallow and I am not yet qualified to enter this hall. Sumo had a general idea in his mind. At that moment, a voice suddenly rang in his mind. The second test of Asura has been passed with excess completion. An additional 5% Asura affinity will be awarded, for a total of 15%. The current total affinity was 20%. Chapter 73 Re-encounter with Tang Hao inside the palace of the King of Slaughter. At this moment, Blood Wolf was entangled with a woman. Suddenly, the space above the main hall distorted. Immediately afterwards, a dark red vortex appeared out of thin air. Blood Wolf on the throne trembled violently and hurriedly pushed away the woman in his arms. The woman was caught off guard and was pushed to the ground. She looked at Blood Wolf with a puzzled expression, not understanding what had happened. But at this moment, Blood Wolf couldn't care less about her. He frantically straightened his clothes as he hurried down the steps, heading towards the vortex. The next moment, Sumo's figure emerged from the vortex and landed steadily in the main hall. Blood Wolf immediately knelt on one knee. Welcome, great king. Get up. Sumo glanced indifferently at the disheveled woman beside the throne, then quickly looked away without saying anything more. Upon hearing this, Blood Wolf immediately stood up. He looked at Sumo in front of him, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. 6 months ago, when Sumo left this place, although he tried to suppress the killing intent in his body, Blood Wolf could still clearly sense its presence. That murderous aura was almost tangible. Just getting close to it could make one's hair stand on end, as if falling into an ice cellar. But now there was not a trace of killing intent emanating from Sumo the uninformed. He would just be an ordinary teenager and would never associate him with that ruthless killer. However, Blood Wolf knew very well that the more this was the case, the more terrifying it was. This showed that Sumo had reached a point where he could control his killing intent with complete ease. Long have I been gone? Sumo asked calmly, standing with his hands behind his back. Your Majesty, it has been about 6 months, Blood Wolf replied hastily. Sumo nodded slightly and continued to ask, during my absence, has anything unusual happened in the city of Slaughter? Everything is normal, nothing unusual has happened. Blood Wolf paused, then suddenly remembered something and added, by the way, not long after you left, a man entered the killing city. He was not a fallen one, but like you, he came here specifically for training. His spirit is the Clear Sky Hammer, and in the past 6 months he has won 27 consecutive matches. Clear Sky Hammer, Sumo repeated softly, a thoughtful look flashing in his eyes. Was that person Tang Hao or Tang Chen? How old is he? What does he look like? Sumo asked. Blood Wolf quickly replied. He looks to be almost 30 years old with a rather resolute face and a sturdy build. Sumo pondered for a moment, and then a plan came to mind. According to Blood Wolf's description, that person was most likely Tang Hao. This was Sumo's territory now. If Tang Hao came here, wasn't he just like a lamb entering a tiger's den? Sumo still remembered how Tang Wei, the sect master of the Clear Sky sect, had used intimidation to pressure him back then at the Heaven Dew Arena, trying to renege on his debt. If it hadn't been for Golden Crocodile Douluo standing behind him and stabilizing the situation, it was uncertain whether he could have left the Heaven Dew Great Soul Arena alive. At the time, his own strength was insufficient, and Golden Crocodile Douluo was wary of Tang Chen's existence, so the matter was ultimately dropped. But he kept all those debts in his heart and never forgot them. I understand. Sumo's lips curled into a faint smile. I'm leaving now. Make sure to keep a close watch on the killing city. Blood Wolf bowed and replied, rest assured, I will do my utmost to guard this place for you and will not dare to make the slightest mistake. Sumo didn't say anything more and turned to walk out of the hall, respectfully bidding farewell to our great king. Your humble servants await your return at any time. Blood Wolf's voice rang out behind Sumo. Only after Sumo's figure completely disappeared outside the palace gate did Blood Wolf breathe a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. At that moment the woman behind him was too shocked to speak. The king of slaughter was actually that young man's subordinate. Was that young man the true king of the killing city? After leaving the palace of the king of slaughter, Sumo did not rush to leave the city of slaughter. He walked straight toward the hell-killing arena. His steps were neither hurried nor slow as he walked through the dark streets of the killing city. The fallen people on both sides of the street avoided him as if they had seen the Grim Reaper, fearing that getting too close would bring them death. Sumo was already used to this and didn't even bother to look at them. Of course, there were also a few newcomers who wanted to cause trouble for Sumo, but they were all dealt with by him with a single sword strike. Soon he arrived at the hell-killing arena and took his seat in the last row. The vast majority of people present still recognized Sumo, and they avoided him as if he were a plague god, not daring to get any closer. The originally packed audience seats quickly emptied out in a large area centered on Sumo, creating a bizarre scene. Sumo ignored this and sat there calmly, watching the two matches quietly. In each match, the battles on stage were bloody and brutal, with the fallen fighting with all their might to survive, their roars and screams rising and falling. Just then, a figure at the entrance suddenly caught Sumo's attention. The person who arrived was Tang Hao. Since his defeat to Sumo that year, Tang Hao had been deeply affected and was ordered by Tang Chen to be confined to the sect. That defeat was a great humiliation for Tang Hao, and it was also a disgrace to the Clear Sky sect, bringing shame upon the sect. In the past few years, Tang Hao had never stepped out of the sect. He trained relentlessly, swinging his hammer countless times, all for the day he could defeat Sumo, avenge his past humiliation and wash away the shame of that year. Just 6 months ago, Tang Hao proposed to Tang Wei his plan to go to the city of slaughter for training. As the #1 sect in the world, the Clear Sky sect naturally had some understanding of the city of slaughter and knew what kind of place it was. The elders of the sect had all tried to dissuade him. After all, it was a hell that devoured people without spitting out their bones, and many powerful people who went and never came out again. But Tang Hao was determined to leave and refused to change his mind no matter who tried to persuade him. After discussing it, Tang Wei and Tang Chen finally agreed to let him go and gain experience. Thus, Tang Hao entered the city of slaughter under the escort of the sect elders. At this moment, Tang Hao seemed to sense something, turned his head and looked up just in time to meet Sumo's gaze. The moment their eyes met, Tang Hao's breath hitched. Although several years had passed and Sumo's face had completely lost its youthful naivety and gained more maturity and definition, Tang Hao still recognized him at a glance. He would never forget Sumo's face, the one who had humiliated him so deeply. At the same time, memories of that year came flooding back. The killing intent within Tang Hao's body immediately began to overflow uncontrollably. Damn it, what's he doing here? Is he here for training too? Tang Hao frowned, alarm bells ringing in his mind. Chapter 74, Collecting Interest. Sons paying for father's debts. Soul rings and soul skills cannot be used in the city of slaughter, but the abilities of soul bones are not restricted. Tang Hao had personally experienced the power of Sumo's 100,000-year-old soul bone, and Sumo also had an external soul bone, which was even more unpredictable. Even though he was close to reaching the Soul Saint realm, his strength was already far beyond what it used to be. Even though he had won 27 games in the past 6 months, was in high spirits and full of confidence, but he knew very well that he was no match for Sumo in this city of slaughter. If he were outside, he would still have a chance to use the soul ring detonation technique to try his luck, but in the city of slaughter, soul rings cannot be used, so he had no rings to detonate and had one less trump card. At this moment, he wanted to leave the hellish killing field immediately, get as far away from Sumo as possible. Several years ago at the Heaven Do Arena, although the two sides never actually fought, a grudge had already been formed. In this lawless, dog-eat-dog world of slaughter, if he were to die here, the Clear Sky sect wouldn't even know who killed him. They would only assume he died at the hands of the fallen, leaving them unable to avenge him. Therefore, he dared not gamble on whether Sumo would take action against him because of what happened back then. He couldn't afford to gamble. However, he could not leave now because he had already registered and could only wait for the competition to begin. There was no way out. The rules of the Hell Slaughter Arena are strict. If you leave the arena without permission after registering, it will be considered as challenging the King of Slaughter and the consequences will be unimaginable. Even Tang Hao wouldn't dare to break this rule easily. Time slowly passed second by second. Sumo was not in a hurry to do anything to Tang Hao. He sat quietly in the audience, his expression calm as if he had everything under control. Before long, Tang Hao began the competition with 9 fallen ones. It must be said that Tang Hao, who had mastered the Clear Sky technique, was invincible and unstoppable in this killing city where spirit rings cannot be used. Even without the enhancement of soul skills, the Clear Sky Hammer's sheer weight was enough to crush any opponent. Tang Hao wielded the Clear Sky Hammer with great force and imposing momentum. Each hammer blow carried an irresistible force. In the end, one by one, the opponents fell. Tang Hao achieved his 28th consecutive victory. After the match ended, Tang Hao didn't linger, not even pausing to catch his breath, and headed straight for the exit. After leaving the hellish killing field, his soul power surged wildly as he rushed towards his residence. His figure darted swiftly through the dark streets. He walked through one dark alley after another, and over one building after another without daring to stop for even a moment. Before long, Tang Hao had run a considerable distance. However, at that moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him, blocking his way. The person who arrived was none other than Sumo. Damn it. Tang Hao cursed inwardly. He didn't know why Sumo was so fast. He didn't even realize when Sumo appeared. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere. "Brother Tang, how have you been?" Sumo stood with his hands behind his back, a faint smile on his lips. His tone was as if he were greeting an old friend without a trace of hostility, but it was precisely this nonchalant attitude that intensified Tang Hao's unease. It was like the calm before the storm. Tang Hao took a deep breath, trying to calm himself down, and asked in a deep voice, "Sumo, what do you want to do?" Sumo's identity had become an open secret over the past few years due to the deliberate investigations by various powerful forces. Therefore, Tang Hao knew Sumo's real name and his identity as a disciple of the Pope. Sumo said calmly, "Brother Tang, why are you so nervous? It's rare to meet an old friend in this city of slaughter. I've just come to catch up." "Reminisce about the past," Tang Hao said in a deep voice. "What past is there between us to reminisce about?" Of course, it was about the Heaven Do Arena a few years ago. Brother Tang's father used intimidation to coerce me back then and even said that I would never be able to leave the Heaven Do Arena. He remembered that posture and that tone very clearly. Tang Hao's face darkened. "What do you want?" "Of course, we should charge some interest." "Brother Tang, how much interest do you think would be appropriate?" Tang Hao's heart skipped a beat. "Sumo, what happened back then was done by my father. If you want to collect interest, go find him at the Clear Sky sect. What does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with you?" Sumo chuckled, a hint of mockery flashing in his eyes. "It's only natural that a son should pay for his father's debts. You must understand that, right? Therefore, this debt should naturally be placed on his shoulders. And don't worry, he would definitely go to his father's place too." "You." Tang Hao's face turned ashen, his fists clenched tightly. He finally understood. Sumo came here today specifically to get rid of him. From the very beginning, he had no intention of letting him off the hook and would not give up no matter what. Therefore, he quickly made a decision and decided to take the initiative and seize the opportunity. His soul power surged, directly condensing into the Clear Sky Hammer. "A strike that soars to the heavens." Tang Hao roared angrily, and the Clear Sky Hammer in his hand suddenly enlarged. He raised the Clear Sky Hammer with both hands and smashed it down on Sumo's head. He poured all his strength into this strike, and even a Soul Saint Realm expert would not be able to block it easily. However, Sumo didn't move an inch, remaining standing in the same spot without even a flicker of emotion in his eyes. He simply watched the Clear Sky Hammer hurtling towards him. Just as the hammerhead was 3 feet above Sumo's head, a dark red light suddenly shone from his left leg. He activated the blood-red 9-headed Bat King's left leg soul bone skill, Bat Wing Blood Shield. A layer of blood-red shield instantly enveloped Sumo, enveloping him completely. Bang! The massive Clear Sky Hammer slammed into the crimson shield with a deafening roar. However, that seemingly thin shield completely blocked the Clear Sky Hammer's advance, keeping it outside. Moreover, the surface of the shield showed no signs of breakage whatsoever. It was merely rippling with waves. "That's impossible." Tang Hao was horrified and his pupils suddenly contracted. He hadn't expected that Sumo would possess a soul bone of considerable age. Where did Sumo get so many top-tier soul bones? What is that all the strength Brother Tang has? Sumo said calmly. I've already let you make the first move, so now it's my turn. Good. Tang Hao felt a chill run down his spine and a strong sense of crisis instantly surged into his heart. He stomped his feet on the ground and retreated rapidly. However, at that moment, a chill suddenly enveloped his surroundings. The chill seemed to surge from the deepest hell, penetrating straight into the depths of Tang Hao's soul. That was Sumo's Asura domain. Within the domain, Tang Hao's strength was instantly suppressed by 20%. This immediately filled Tang Hao with fear. He was already no match for Sumo, and now his strength was being suppressed. How could he fight back? Chapter 75. The soul bone inherited by the Clear Sky Sect. Tang Hao dies at this moment. The Asura Demon Sword martial soul condensed in Sumo's palm. Immediately afterwards, his spirit rings lit up one by one: yellow, purple, purple, black. When the first 4 spirit rings appeared, Tang Hao was surprised, but he could barely accept it. Since the major powers learned about the uses of whale glue, he has also taken some. His 6th spirit ring was absorbed after breaking through the limit of years. Sumo's ability to achieve the 2nd ring in 1,000 years and the 4th ring in 10,000 years is astonishing but not entirely shocking. However, what truly shocked Tang Hao was yet to come. Sumo's spirit rings continued to appear. Red, red, red. The moment the last 3 spirit rings landed, Tang Hao's pupils constricted sharply, his face filled with disbelief. He stared intently at the 3 red spirit rings, almost unable to believe his eyes. No, this is impossible, Tang Hao exclaimed in disbelief. How could you possibly absorb a 100,000-year-old soul ring? This was completely beyond his comprehension. Even if Sumo had been consuming whale glue since childhood to continuously strengthen his body, it would have been impossible for him to absorb a 100,000-year soul ring by the time he reached his 5th soul ring. Moreover, Sumo was actually able to use a spirit ring in the city of slaughter. He was already a god of slaughter at this moment. Tang Hao's back was soaked with cold sweat. An unprecedented fear rose from the bottom of his heart and instantly spread throughout his body. Back when his soul power was 3 levels higher than Sumo's, Sumo easily defeated him without even using his martial soul. Now Sumo has not only reached the Soul Saint realm, but his soul power is far superior to his own. He can also use soul rings and has 3 100,000-year soul rings. How could he possibly win? Sumo, I am the young master of the Clear Sky Sect, and my grandfather is a peak expert of level 99. If you dare touch me, the Clear Sky Sect and my grandfather will never let you get away with this. At this moment, Tang Hao no longer had any thought of resistance. Those 3 100,000-year soul rings were like a mountain pressing down on his heart. His only hope now is to invoke the names of the Clear Sky Sect and Tang Chen to make Sumo think twice, but he knew in his heart that this was just a last-ditch effort. Even if Sumo killed him in this city of slaughter, the Clear Sky Sect would not be able to find out who did it. Sumo chuckled lightly. Don't worry, even if the Clear Sky Sect doesn't come looking for me, I will pay them a visit sooner or later. Before that, we need to collect some interest first. 4th soul skill, unending slaughter. Asura Demon Sword flashed with a red light. Sumo raised his hand and waved it, and a blood-red sword aura shot out from the sword, heading straight for Tang Hao's left leg. May the Heavenly Guardian protect you. Tang Hao gritted his teeth, his soul power surging wildly throughout his body. He gripped the hammer handle with both hands and spun it wildly. The hammer shadows overlapped, forming a dense energy shield around him, completely protecting him inside. The protective shield appeared flawless and indestructible. However, the gap in strength cannot be bridged by giving it your all. Tang Hao was already no match for Sumo, let alone Sumo who had activated the Asura domain, greatly increasing his own strength, while Tang Hao was completely suppressed by the domain. With the balance shifting and the attack ignoring defenses of the infinite slaughter, the power of Sumo's strike had long exceeded Tang Hao's tolerance limit. The crimson sword energy roared in and crashed into the energy shield. Almost instantly, the seemingly flawless defense was as fragile as paper in the face of the crimson sword energy and was directly pierced through. The sword energy continued its momentum, precisely grazing Tang Hao's left leg. Tang Hao's left calf was severed at the root below the knee and blood gushed out instantly, splattering onto the dimly lit street. At the same time, a piece of soul bone broke off from his severed leg and fell into the pool of blood. That was the inherited soul bone of the Clear Sky Sect. At the same time, having lost his soul bone, Tang Hao's strength plummeted to the Soul King realm. Lost his left leg, Tang Hao lost his balance and fell heavily to the ground, letting out a heart-wrenching scream. The voice was filled with pain and despair. However, this is just the beginning. Sumo swung the Asura Demon Sword in his hand once again. The next instant, a sharp sword light flashed. Tang Hao's entire right arm was severed cleanly at the shoulder and blood gushed out again. Tang Hao let out an even more shrill scream than before. In excruciating pain, veins bulged on his forehead and the color drained from his face instantly, leaving it as pale as paper. But at this moment Sumo frowned slightly, because no soul bone fell from Tang Hao's right arm. As far as Sumo knew, Tang Hao possessed 2 inherited soul bones from the Clear Sky Sect. However, it seems that Tang Hao only got one piece and the other piece probably hasn't been passed on to him yet. However, one piece is enough. Although Sumo didn't think much of this soul bone, it was quite old, so taking it back for the people around him to absorb wouldn't be bad. Thank you for the soul bone, Brother Tang, I will accept it. Sumo activated his soul power, rolled up the soul bone and stored it in his soul tool. No, my soul bone, Sumo, you dare. That is the inherited soul bone of the Clear Sky sect. The Clear Sky sect will not let you get away with this. My grandfather will not let you get away with this. Tang Hao stared at Sumo with reddened eyes, his gaze filled with resentment and anger. Sumo shook his head dismissively. You should think about how to survive in the city of slaughter first. After saying that, Sumo raised his sword and swiftly severed Tang Hao's other hand and leg. Blood gushed from the cut, but no soul bone fell out. Apart from the two inherited soul bones, Tang Hao obtained the other 4 soul bones by hunting soul beasts or killing people to steal treasures when he traveled the continent with Tang Zio. At this point in time, Tang Hao did not yet possess those soul bones. Sumo withdrew his martial spirit, picked up Tang Hao's soul tool, turned around calmly and left without looking back. He did not kill Tang Hao directly. Tang Hao is now a cripple, and in this bloodthirsty city where people devour each other without spitting out bones, there is no way he can survive. Those corrupt individuals will not let a severely injured Tang Hao go unpunished. As for whether Tang San could be born after Tang Hao's death, Sumo didn't care. The Asura legacy is already in his grasp. Even if Tang San really comes to Douluo Continent, he won't be able to cause any trouble. By then, he should have already become a god. Shortly after Sumo left, the fallen ones swarmed forward, their eyes filled with greed. After all, that was a top-quality Bloody Mary. Someone rushed to the severed limbs to retrieve Bloody Mary. Someone took a knife and stabbed Tang Hao, causing him to bleed. Tang Hao's screams echoed through the dimly lit street. Someone thought he was too noisy, so they cut off his tongue. Blood gushed from Tang Hao's mouth and he could only utter incoherent sobs. As time passed, the screams gradually faded away. Tang Hao's blood was used by wave after wave of fallen ones until the last drop of blood was drained. The once-proud genius of the Clear Sky sect died tragically in the filthy alleys of the Slaughter City, like a slaughtered animal. His eyes remained wide open until his death. Chapter 76, Leaving the City of Slaughter. The third trial of Shur. Not long after, Sumo then left the dark and desolate city of Slaughter. He took a deep breath of the long-awaited fresh air, and felt much more relaxed. Just then, the content of the third trial of Asura appeared. The third trial of Asura, Judgment of Sin, judge 1,000 sinners across the continent. Note that those within the city of Slaughter are not included in the trial. The time limit is 1 year. The test itself wasn't too difficult, but the divine test clearly didn't intend for him to find any loopholes. After all, the city of Slaughter is full of heinous criminals and desperate criminals. If he could include them, Sumo could complete the assessment in a single day. In that case, let's go to the continent for a trip and relax. He had spent almost 3 years in that hellish place called the City of Slaughter, where every day he was surrounded by bloodshed, slaughter, and endless evil. Now that he had finally managed to get out, he might as well take this opportunity to travel around and adjust his mindset. With a thought, he released the black gold sword wings that were attached to his external soul bone. With a flap of his wings, he transformed into a black streak of light and soared into the sky, flying towards the nearest human town. Half an hour later, Sumo landed outside a town called Tianxing City. The town was not large and was located in a rather remote area. Sumo quickly entered the city. The streets were lined with all sorts of stalls. There were vendors selling cloth, candied hawthorns, and groceries. Everything imaginable was available. The shouts of vendors rose and fell, and occasionally the laughter of children chasing and playing could be heard. As Sumo walked along the bustling street, looking at the everyday scene before him and feeling the lively atmosphere, he felt exceptionally relaxed. Before long, his gaze fell on a restaurant with fairly decent decor. During his 3 years in the City of Slaughter, he ate mostly dry rations stored in his soul tool, which had no real flavor. Now that he was out here, he should naturally satisfy his long-lost appetite. Please come in, sir. Seeing Sumo's extraordinary demeanor, the waiter immediately greeted him with a beaming smile, leading him inside while warmly welcoming him. Soon Sumo followed the waiter upstairs and sat down by the window. This location offered an excellent view with a clear view of the street scene below. Sir, what would you like to eat? The waiter quickly wiped the table and bowed as he asked. Bring 3 or 4 of your restaurant's signature dishes and a pot of good wine. Sumo took out a gold soul coin from his soul tool and placed it on the table. The waiter's eyes lit up immediately and his smile became even more ingratiating. All right, please wait a moment, sir. I'll go prepare it for you right away. Before long, the dishes were served one after another. After a few rounds of drinks, they had almost finished eating. Just as Sumo was about to leave, a commotion suddenly broke out on the street. Out of the way, get out of the way. Don't you have eyes? Sumo turned his head and looked down through the window. Pedestrians scattered to the sides, their faces filled with fear. A short while later, a young master dressed in brocade robes swaggered into the middle of the street, accompanied by 7 or 8 burly guards making quite a grand entrance. The young man was about 20 years old. He was fair-skinned and had regular features, but there was an arrogant look between his brows. At that moment, an old man selling vegetables on the street was slow because of his age. and his stall was kicked over by the guard. Vegetables were scattered all over the ground, and things like tomatoes were rolling around everywhere on the road. However, the old man dared not say anything more, but hurriedly knelt on the ground and kept kowtowing, repeatedly saying, "Sir, spare my life." That young Master Zhao didn't even glance at him and walked straight past. The group of guards behind him also filed past arrogantly. It was as if what had just been kicked over was not an old man's livelihood, but a stone blocking his way. Before long, the group turned the corner and disappeared at the end of the street. The people on the street finally breathed a sigh of relief. Just then, Sumo's figure disappeared from the restaurant. In the blink of an eye, he appeared on the street. "Grandpa, are you all right?" He squatted down and helped the old man pick up the vegetables that had rolled onto the ground. The old man looked up and saw a distinguished young man helping him pick up his things. He quickly reached out his hand, his fingers trembling to take the items. "Young man, thank you, I'm fine," Sumo casually asked. "Who were those people just now? Why were you so afraid of them?" Upon hearing this, the old man's expression changed instantly. He subconsciously looked around before lowering his voice and saying, "Young man, you must be from out of town, right? Those people just now belong to the Zhao family of the city lord's mansion. The one in the lead is the young master of the Zhao family." "Zhao family?" Sumo raised an eyebrow slightly. The old man sighed deeply. His cloudy eyes filled with helplessness. "Young man, you don't know this. Tianxing City is a border town of the Heaven Dew Empire. Even the empire can't govern this place. The Zhao family is the local tyrant here." Sumo asked calmly, "Oh, what did they do?" The old man looked around again, leaned closer, and lowered his voice. "The Zhao family has been running rampant in Tianxing City for decades, abducting women, oppressing the people, and doing all sorts of bad things. Just recently, there was a blacksmith in the south of the city named Li Leasi. He had been blacksmithing all his life and was an honest and hardworking man. He also has a daughter who is only 15 years old and very beautiful. The young master of the Zhao family wanted to take her as a concubine, but Li Leasi naturally refused because none of the women who entered the city lord's mansion had a good ending. As a result, that very night, the Zhao family sent men to break Li the blacksmith's legs and forcibly took his daughter into the city lord's mansion. And then, Sumo's eyes had turned cold. Perhaps the Zhao family should meet his requirements for the divine examination. Since he had run into the situation, they could only blame the Zhao family for their bad luck. And then, the old man gave a bitter smile. Li the blacksmith dragged his crippled body to demand an explanation, but he was beat to death by the Zhao family's guards. Girl stayed in the city lord's mansion for less than 10 days before being thrown out, covered in injuries and even somewhat delirious. After learning of her father's accident, she also committed suicide by drowning. Alas, this is only what has happened recently. Over the past few decades, the Zhao family has committed countless evil deeds. The old man lowered his voice and cautioned, "Young man, I think you're a good person. Take my advice and don't stay in Tianxing City any longer. If you offend the Zhao family, the consequences will be unimaginable." Heard that the Zhao family has a sole emperor-level elder who is the strongest person in Tianxing City. It is precisely because of that sole emperor expert that every family in Tianxing City lives under the thumb of the Zhao family. If the Zhao family says one, no one dares to disagree. Sumo nodded calmly. "Thank you for informing me, sir." After saying that, he walked towards the city lord's mansion. Chapter 77, Bloodbath at the City Lord's Mansion. The Zhao family, the City Lord's Mansion, is located in the center of Tianxing City. It is the most luxurious and largest family estate in the city. The buildings are predominantly white. The towering courtyard walls and the overlapping eaves and brackets exude wealth and grandeur. On either side of the gate stood 2 rows of guards, about a dozen in number, all with solemn expressions. They were soldiers from the city's defense forces. They were dressed in standard silver armor and carried spears, the tips of which gleamed coldly in the sunlight. At that moment, a tall, slender figure suddenly appeared in front of the main gate. The person who arrived was none other than Sumo. The 2 outermost soldiers immediately gripped their spears, the tips pointing directly at Sumo. One of them shouted sternly, "Halt! This is the city lord's mansion. No entry is permitted." However, he hadn't finished speaking. 2 streaks of blood-red sword energy shot out from Sumo's fingertips with lightning speed. The sword energy pierced through their armor in an instant, leaving 2 shocking bloody holes in their hearts. The 2 stared wide-eyed, their pupils suddenly contracting, and looked down in disbelief. Their knees buckled and they fell to the ground with a thud, lifeless. The next moment, blood gushed from the wound, spreading across the bluestone slab, flowing along the cracks in the stone and staining a large area red. Upon seeing this, the other guards' expressions changed drastically. They were on high alert and gripped their spears, aiming them at Sumo. "Boy, you dare to cause trouble in the city lord's mansion. The city lord will not let you get away with this," one of the guards roared, his voice trembling noticeably. These people were just ordinary soldiers, not soul masters, and were more than capable of dealing with ordinary people. But Sumo was clearly a powerful soul master. Fighting such a powerful figure would be tantamount to suicide for their small group. Sumo did not reply, but his body was filled with surging sword energy. His clothes fluttered and rustled even though there was no wind. The next instant, several sharp, blood-red sword energies shot out, precisely targeting the hearts of each guard. The guards had no time to react before their hearts were pierced by the blood-red sword energy, and they fell to the ground one after another. Immediately, Sumo's soul power surged, and he raised his right palm, pushing it forward with a sudden thrust. Boom! The immense soul power crashed into the heavy door, instantly shattering it into pieces, raising clouds of dust and causing the ground to tremble. Sumo calmly stepped over the ruins and into the square in the front yard. Several servants who were working heard the noise and suddenly looked up. When they saw the collapsed gate and the corpses lying haphazardly outside, they were so frightened that they dropped their tools on the ground. "Murder! Murder!" a servant cried out in alarm. Immediately they scrambled and crawled away into the depths. Some people stumbled and fell to the ground, but they scrambled to their feet and continued running, their faces filled with terror. Sumo did not attack them, because they were all ordinary servants who were powerless to even kill a chicken. Before long, soldiers came running after hearing the commotion. The footsteps were dense and heavy, and the clanging of armor clashing resounded. There were over 100 of them, a dense, dark mass pouring into the square from various passageways. They quickly dispersed, surrounding Sumo in the center with spears aimed at him from all directions. The squad leader was clad in iron armor and had a long sword at his waist. His gaze swept between Sumo and the corpse outside the door, and his expression turned extremely ugly. "Do you know where you are? How dare you cause trouble here?" he shouted coldly, his voice loud and clear, trying to intimidate Sumo. As Sumo did not answer. Seeing this, the squad leader's face turned ashen. He raised his hand and ordered sharply, "Take him down, dead or alive." More than 100 soldiers thrust out their spears, aiming at Sumo from all directions. Asura Demon Sword. A terrifying aura suddenly spread out from Sumo, enveloping the entire square. Those soldiers were all ordinary people. In that instant they felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave, and a fear from the depths of their souls swept over them. They couldn't even muster the slightest thought of resistance. They all stopped in their tracks, their spears slipping from their hands and clattering to the ground. Some people's legs went weak and they collapsed to the ground. Some of the timid soldiers even had their crotches soaked. At this moment, Sumo raised his right hand, forming a sword finger, and held it above his head. The next moment, countless blood-red light swords condensed in midair. Lightsabers hung in midair, their tips pointing downwards, densely covering the entire plaza, numbering in the hundreds, radiating a suffocating sense of oppression. As Sumo pressed down with his right hand, countless blood-red light swords emitted a sharp whistling sound and shot down like a torrential rain. In the blink of an eye, the crimson lightsabers pierced through the bodies of all the soldiers below. Fresh blood gushed from their wounds, blooming into clusters of blood flowers. Screams echoed throughout the square. Soon there was not a single person left standing in the square. More than 100 corpses lay scattered in pools of blood, each with a different manner of death. At the same time, the hard stone slab ground was also blasted into countless pits by the rain of swords. The edges of the pits cracked and gravel flew everywhere, dust billowed up. The originally exquisite stone carvings around the area were also shattered with a crash, and stone chips were scattered everywhere, turning the area into a pile of ruins. The once neat and imposing square of the city lord's mansion was transformed into a living hell in an instant. Just as Sumo retracted the Asura sword domain, a furious roar came from the depths of the manor. "Who dares to act so presumptuously in the city lord's mansion? Are they tired of living?" Immediately afterwards, 4 figures rapidly approached. They were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye they landed on the square, maintaining a distance of several dozen meters from Sumo. The leader was a burly middle-aged man with a square face, thick eyebrows and sharp eyes, exuding an aura of authority. This person is the head of the Zhao family and also the city lord of Tianxing City. At this moment he was surrounded by 5 soul rings, 2 yellow, 2 purple and 1 black. His martial soul was the ironclad rhinoceros, and his soul power was level 55 in this remote border town. A level 55 soul king is already considered a powerful figure. Behind Lord Zhao stood 3 other people, all of whom were honorary soul masters whom the Zhao family had hired at great expense. On the far left is an elderly man with a thin build and sallow skin. His eyes gleamed. He wore a gray robe and was surrounded by 6 soul rings, 2 yellow, 2 purple and 2 black. His martial soul was the Wind Shadow Wolf and his soul power was level 69. He was just 1 step away from stepping into the Soul Saint realm. The Zhao family's ability to dominate the city is largely due to this old man. Standing next to the old man was a man in his 50s, broad-shouldered and thick-waisted, with a face full of fat. He wore only a khaki short jacket, revealing his 2 thick arms, and his whole person exuded a sense of brute force. His spirit rings are white, yellow, yellow, purple, purple. His martial soul is rock bear, and his soul power is level 52. Although his strength was not as great as the old man's, it was enough for him to roam freely in this small town. Chapter 78 Judgment of Evil. The remaining person was a lean man in his early 40s. He was tall and slender with a somewhat sinister face. His martial soul is the netherworld ghost vine. His spirit rings are at their best configuration, and his soul power fluctuation is at level 49, making his strength not to be underestimated. They were discussing matters inside when they noticed the commotion outside, so they rushed over immediately without delay. However, when they saw the scene in the square, everyone's expression changed drastically. All that could be seen was a river of blood and corpses strewn across the field. More than 100 well-trained soldiers had perished. The once magnificent and solemn square was also completely destroyed. The leader, City Lord Zhao, suddenly narrowed his eyes, his gaze sweeping over Su Mo, alarm bells ringing in his mind. All of this seemed to be the work of this young man in front of them. You have to understand, even he could never have slaughtered more than 100 well-trained soldiers so quickly. This person is definitely not simple. Young man, I am the City Lord of Tianxing City. City Lord Zhao suppressed his anger. I don't know where my Zhao family has offended you that you would make such a big fuss. If there's any misunderstanding, we can sit down and talk it over. There's nothing that can't be resolved. Of course, Lord Zhao was not so easy to talk to. At this moment, he wished he could tear Sumo to pieces. The main reason is that Sumo has an extraordinary temperament. He is so young yet possesses formidable strength. Lord Zhao knew the soul masters in the city very well. He could name every single one of them. But he had never met anyone named Sumo. It's obvious that Sumo is from out of town, and most likely has an extraordinary background. Although the Zhao family was a local tyrant in the border city, they were nothing compared to the truly powerful forces. If he were to make a move today and offend the forces behind Sumo, the Zhao family would not be able to bear the consequences. At this moment, Sumo calmly spoke. Your Zhao family has been oppressing the people and treating human life like dirt for years. The crimes you have committed are too numerous to count. I have come here today only to judge your Zhao family. Zhao was clearly taken aback. He initially thought it was a member of the family who had offended the person in front of him. Lord Zhao had even planned that if the matter wasn't serious, he could simply pay some compensation to quell the incident. But to his utter surprise, the other party was actually a chivalrous person, standing up for those lowly people. Lord Zhao's eyes turned completely cold. Sumo has already made his point clear, obviously here to cause trouble, and there is no room for negotiation. Kid, it seems you're determined to cause trouble today. At this moment, he no longer cared about Sumo's identity. They've already come knocking on our door. If he backs down, how will the Zhao family maintain their foothold in Tianxing City? Old Chen, make your move. At Lord Zhao's command, the three men behind him instantly sprang into action. The three moved with lightning speed, spreading out as they swept away, subtly forming an encirclement. Old Chen was in the center, Rock Bear Soul Master occupied the right side, and Ghost Vine Soul Master blocked the left side. At this moment, Sumo shouted in a low voice, Asura Demon. A palpable killing intent erupted from Sumo's center. A layer of grayish-white ice spread from beneath his feet, making a soft cracking sound and instantly covered the entire square. Old Chen and the others' expressions changed drastically, their pupils contracted and their charging steps stopped in unison. They never expected that their opponent possessed a domain, and that its suppressive power was so terrifying. But the arrow was already on the bowstring and it had to be released. Be afraid. No matter how strong he is, he's only one person. Don't hold back, attack together. Old Chen shouted. His sixth spirit ring suddenly shone brightly and a powerful surge of spirit power erupted from his body. A several-meter-long arc-shaped wind blade instantly materialized in front of him. He pushed forward suddenly, and the wind blade slashed towards Su Moat. The same time, Ghost Vine Soul Master's fourth purple spirit ring lit up. Suddenly the ground exploded and dozens of pitch-black ghost vines burst forth from the earth. Like venomous snakes, they coiled around Sumo from all directions, each as thick as an arm and covered with sharp thorns. Rock Bear Soul Master roared and his fifth purple spirit ring lit up. A thick layer of rock armor covered his body, making his already burly frame swell even larger. He rushed straight towards Sumo's right side. Control, remote attack, flanking attack. The three worked together perfectly. However, Sumo remained calm and did not even move his feet. A palpable killing intent began to surge within the area. A large amount of grayish-white killing intent began to rotate rapidly around Sumo. Asura spinning circle killing formation. A white vortex condensed and took shape in front of him. The countless ghost vines were instantly torn into countless fragments upon contact with the vortex. After the white vortex dealt with the netherworld ghost vine, it suddenly changed direction and blasted straight at the Rock Bear Soul Master on the side. The Rock Bear Soul Master was shocked. Although he is incredibly strong, speed is precisely his weakness. Now, under the suppression of the domain, his movements have become much slower. The white vortex was incredibly fast, like a white lightning bolt, and he couldn't dodge it at all. He only had time to cross his arms to protect himself and pour all his soul power into the rock armor. However, he was merely a soul king, and the strangulation power of the Asura whirlwind killing array far exceeded his defensive limits. The moment the vortex struck his arms, the rock armor on its surface shattered. Immediately afterward, the vortex swept past, and the Rock Bear Soul Master's burly body was instantly shredded into a cloud of blood mist. At the same time, a sword aura formed from killing intent shot out from Sumo's fingertips, slashing towards the Ghost Vine Soulmaster. Ghost Vine Soulmaster was only a soul sect, and was being suppressed by the domain so he couldn't escape at all. Almost in the blink of an eye, the sword energy sliced across his waist. His upper and lower body suddenly separated. The Rock Bear Soulmaster and the Ghost Vine Soulmaster died almost instantly. At this moment, Elder Chen's wind blade was about to reach Sumo as Sumo raised his right hand, and a sword aura met the wind blade head-on. The two collided in midair. The wind blade was directly shattered by the sword energy. Sumo did not stop. Killing Assault, a longsword imbued with extreme killing intent shot out and locked onto Elder Chen's chest. Old Chen's pupils suddenly contracted. Even as a level 69 Soul Emperor, his strength was still formidable. Within a radius of several hundred miles, there are many renowned and powerful individuals. But when faced with this sword, he found that he couldn't dodge it at all. He's completely locked down. In his haste, he could only mobilize all his soul power to condense a solid wind wall in front of him in an attempt to block the killing intent sword. However, with Sumo's current strength, how could a Soul Emperor who was being suppressed by the domain possibly withstand his attack? The sword energy crashed into the wind wall with a loud bang, tearing a hole in it. Immediately afterwards, the sword energy pierced through Elder Chen's heart. Old Chen glanced down, his eyes filled with resentment. Immediately blood spilled from his mouth, his body swayed, and he fell backward, dying with his eyes wide open. Fear finally surfaced in the eyes of Lord Zhao, who was standing in the distance. The renowned expert of Tianxing City was instantly killed in a single encounter. Chapter 79. Hundreds slaughtered in one day. Who exactly are you? Lord Zhao's voice trembled. He had ruled Tianxing City for decades and killed countless people, but he never imagined that one day he would become a lamb to the slaughter. However, Sumo did not answer. He walked towards Lord Zhao with a blank expression. You stay away. Lord Zhao kept retreating. At this moment, he had no intention of resisting. Even Elder Chen had been killed with a single sword strike, so how could he possibly be a match for him? Just as he was retreating in panic, he suddenly stumbled and fell to the ground. He could only move backward using both his hands and feet, looking extremely disheveled, his former imposing manner completely gone. A moment later, he retreated to the edge of the steps where he could no longer move. He quickly got up, knelt down, and kowtowed repeatedly, leaving bloodstains on the ground. At the same time, he kept begging for mercy. Sir, please spare me. I can give you anything you want, money, power, beautiful women, anything I have, I'll give you. Just please spare my life. At this moment, he only hoped that Sumo would take a liking to these things and let him off the hook. Sumo walked up to him, stopped, and looked down at him. When you killed those innocent people, they begged for mercy, Sumo said coldly. Did you ever spare them? Someone like you should go down and repent. As soon as Sumo finished speaking, a blood-red sword aura suddenly swept past. Lord Zhao's head flew up, tumbled twice in the air, and then rolled a few times on the ground. His eyes were wide open and remained that way until his death. The city lord of Tianxing City died, but Sumo did not leave. Instead, he continued walking deeper into the mansion. The Zhao family had been entrenched in this city for decades and had long since become a large and powerful clan. The direct descendants and collateral branches in total numbered over 100 people. As long as they were members of the Zhao family, regardless of age or gender, Sumo would eliminate them completely, no matter whether they had committed any evil deeds. In just a short while, the huge city lord's mansion was completely empty. After massacring the Zhao family, Sumo arrived at the treasure vault. He blasted the heavy door open with a single palm strike. A spacious room was filled with boxes stacked one next to another, reaching the height of 2 people. Sumo casually opened one of them. The moment the lid was lifted, golden light shone on his face. It turned out to be a whole chest of gold and silver jewelry. Sumo opened several more boxes, which contained either gold soul coins or various treasures. The lord of a small town was so wealthy. It was evident how much wealth the Zhao family had plundered from the people over the years. With a wave of his hand, Sumo put all these items into his soul tool. After doing all this, Sumo did not leave the Zhao family residence, because there was one person who had not yet returned, and that was the young master of the Zhao family. Time passed second by second. About half an hour later, under Sumo's spiritual perception, a large number of people, numbering in the hundreds, surrounded the Zhao family residence. Those men were city defense soldiers, clad in iron armor, wielding long spears and arrayed in neat formation. The person in the lead was dressed in fine clothes. He was none other than the young master of the Zhao family whom they had seen on the street before. Although he knew that several powerful figures, including Elder Chen, were stationed in the manor, the situation was still unclear. To be on the safe side, after learning that a battle had broken out in the city lord's mansion, he urgently dispatched the city defense troops to the scene. Damn it, who is it that dares to cause trouble at the Zhao family's residence? Looking at the mess at the gate, the young master of the Zhao family was filled with rage, his face twisted with fury. At that moment, Sumo's figure suddenly appeared in the sky above the city lord's mansion. His wings fluttered behind him and his black hair danced in the wind. His white clothes were mostly stained red with blood, which looked particularly glaring in the sunlight. "Boy, who are you? Did you do all this? Where is my father?" The young master of the Zhao family pointed at Sumo and shouted sternly. "He's dead," Sumo said calmly. "I'll send you down to see him right away." As soon as he finished speaking, the Asura sword domain unfolded once again. A terrifying aura suddenly spread out from him. In an instant, countless blood-red light swords condensed above Sumo, one after another appearing out of thin air, densely covering the entire sky. This time there were over 1,000 of them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sky was filled with blood-red light swords that rained down on the crowd below. Damn it! The young master of the Zhao family hurriedly released his spirit in an attempt to defend himself. However, he was only a level 29 Great Soul Master. How could he possibly withstand Sumo's attack? As the rain of swords fell, his defenses were instantly pierced, and dozens of light swords pierced through his body, riddling him with holes on the spot. Although the ordinary soldiers wore armor, that armor was as fragile as tofu in front of the blood-red light swords. Flash of sword light, a splatter of blood, and screams echoed throughout the street. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of people outside the city lord's mansion had all died, and blood flowed like a river. After killing these people, Sumo's progress in the divine test advanced significantly. However, although he killed hundreds of people, not every one of them was counted in the assessment. Most of those soldiers were just ordinary people who were usually arrogant and domineering, simply trying to make a living under the Zhao family. They were not particularly wicked or evil, so they were not included. Those truly included in the progress of the divine examination were mostly members of the Zhao family. At this moment, Sumo withdrew his sword domain and the crimson sky vanished without a trace. People in the distance, whose doors had been tightly shut, cautiously pushed them open and peered out. When they saw the figure in midair and then the corpses scattered all over the ground in front of the city lord's mansion, they all showed expressions of disbelief. How could such a powerful family as the Zhao family be wiped out by a young man? At that moment, someone stepped forward and knelt down first. Immediately afterwards, the dark mass of people bowed down like waves of wheat in the wind, one after another kneeling. "Heaven has eyes, heaven has eyes. My child was killed by that beast from the Zhao family. It's been 3 years and finally someone has avenged her." An elderly woman with white hair knelt on the ground, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, sir, thank you, sir." At this moment, Sumo landed in the street. "Everyone, please rise." As he spoke, he took out more than a dozen boxes from his soul tool. "Zhao family has been running rampant for years, and every penny here is stained with your blood and sweat. This should belong to you. Line up and come forward one by one to receive it." Sumo only took out a small portion. It was not because he coveted the mountain of wealth. He knew all too well that for an ordinary person, getting rich overnight was not a good thing. This money was enough to improve the livelihoods of these people. Chapter 80. Your Highness, the Blue-Silver Emperor Yin. As time went by, the news spread like wildfire throughout the streets and alleys of Tianxing City. More and more people flocked in from all directions. At first, there were only a few dozen people, but later the number grew to several hundred. In the end, the entire main street was packed with people. Among the crowd were elderly people with white hair supported by their children and grandchildren, women holding children, and beggars in tattered clothes. Some were crying, some were laughing, and many kept asking others to confirm whether the news was true. Just then, a group of people dressed in the uniforms of Spirit Hall suddenly walked over from a distance. The leader was an elderly man over 50 years old with a thin face. The old man was the hall master of the Tianxing City Spirit Branch Hall, and he was followed by several deacons. At this moment, the branch hall master frowned, walked quickly, and looked solemn. He had rushed over after receiving news of the Zhao family's massacre. It was not that he was worried about the Zhao family's life or death. The Zhao family was wary of Spirit Hall and did not dare to do anything to the Spirit Hall branch. However, Tianxing City was too remote, and the hall master of the Spirit Branch Hall was only a sole emperor. He had been hesitant because the Zhao family were officials of the Heaven Dew Empire, and he was wary of their family's strength. Therefore, the two sides kept to themselves and maintained a delicate balance. What made the branch hall master's expression solemn was something else entirely. The person who single-handedly slaughtered the entire Zhao family, even wiping out Elder Chen, a level 69 soul emperor, must have been at least a soul saint. Moreover, that person killed hundreds of people with a single move. As the head of the Spirit Hall branch, he could not stand idly by while spirit masters massacred people in the city. Although he knew very well that his strength was probably inferior to that of his opponent, but no matter what, he had to come and investigate. Soul Master from Spirit Hall has arrived. The people recognized them and made way. Soon the branch hall master walked through the crowd, and his pupils suddenly contracted when he saw Sumo's figure. Sumo was too young. He looked no more than 20 years old, with a cool and aloof expression and an otherworldly air. Although his white clothes were mostly soaked in blood, he showed no signs of being disheveled. What alarmed the branch hall master the most was that Sumo's aura was as calm as still water, with his sharpness concealed. Such a young man was definitely the chosen one of some powerful force. The branch hall master took a deep breath, strode forward, and stopped a few meters in front of Sumo. He bowed respectfully, his voice neither humble nor I am the hall master of the spirit branch hall of Tianxing City. May I ask who you are? Hearing this, the surrounding crowd immediately fell silent, and all eyes focused on Sumo as Sumo stood with his hands behind his back, glanced at the branch hall master indifferently, said nothing, and simply flipped his hand. A token appeared in his palm. It was the Holy Sun's token. The branch hall master's gaze fell on the token and his expression changed drastically. The next moment he straightened his clothes, knelt on one knee and respectfully said, "Your subordinate greets your highness. I was unaware of your highness's arrival and have greatly offended you. Please forgive me." The dozen or so deacons behind him were taken aback for a moment, then knelt down in unison. "Greetings, your highness." The surrounding crowd immediately erupted in an uproar. His Highness the Holy Sun, our benefactor, is actually the Holy Sun of Spirit Hall. Spirit Hall's reputation on the continent was renowned even in a small border town like Tianxing City. The Holy Sun of Spirit Hall was a very important figure. Such an important figure had actually come to their small town in person to rid them of the Zhao family, this cancerous tumor. The people knelt down again, their voices even more devout and fervent than before. "Greetings, your highness. Get up, everyone." Sumo's voice was not loud, but it clearly reached everyone's ears. At this moment the branch hall master spoke up. "Your highness, I deeply admire your act of ridding the people of this scourge, but the Zhao family is a noble family of the Heaven Dew Empire and I am worried." "It's alright, he's just a small city lord in a remote area," Sumo said calmly. "So what if the Heaven Dew Empire knows? Do you think they'd dare to do anything to Spirit Hall?" Upon hearing this, the branch hall master's expression relaxed. "What your highness says is absolutely right. Leave the matters here to me. You may rest for now." Sumo nodded slightly. The branch hall master immediately turned around and instructed the deacons behind him. "What are you all standing there for? Someone come and distribute the money, and the rest of you maintain order. Make sure they line up properly and do not cause trouble." The deacons responded in unison and quickly dispersed. Soon, the people of the city began to receive their money again. At this moment, a thin boy received a few gold soul coins, carefully held them in his palm and looked up at the woman beside him. "Mom, can we have meat tonight?" The woman's eyes reddened and she hugged the child tightly, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, it's all thanks to His Highness the Holy Sun." Such scenes constantly played out among the crowd. Almost everyone who received the money was extremely grateful to Sumo. At the back of the crowd stood a woman who seemed to have no intention of coming forward to collect the money. The woman had a graceful figure, with long, smooth blue hair that reached her waist and swayed gently in the breeze. At this moment her gaze passed through the crowd and landed on Sumo. "The Holy Son of Spirit Hall," she murmured softly. "He's quite an interesting person." In her mind, whether human powerhouses or soul beast powerhouses, most were high and mighty beings. But Sumo, who stood in the distance, slaughtered a noble family that had been entrenched there for decades, all for the sake of ordinary people he did not know. He was not doing it for his own benefit nor for power. It was simply about seeking justice for those people who had been oppressed for so long. This was the first time she had ever met someone like this. Moreover, that person looked far too young yet possessed such formidable strength. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of people were slaughtered. Just then Sumo, who was at the very front, seemed to sense something. His gaze pierced through the crowd and met the woman's eyes. Sumo remained calm as he scanned the area with his spiritual power. Although Sumo was only a soul saint now, his spiritual strength was extremely powerful. He instantly sensed a trace of a soul beast's aura. Based on her appearance, Sumo instantly recognized who she was. At this time, the only transformed soul beast roaming outside was the 100,000-year-old blue-silver emperor, Ah Yin. Sumo's guess was indeed correct. That person was Ah Yin. As a transformed soul beast, she could only continue to cultivate by coming into contact with humans. Therefore, since transforming, she had been staying in some remote small towns. She had only recently arrived in this remote border town, where the strongest being was only a soul emperor, making it relatively safe for her. She had seen people rushing toward the city center and could not help but feel curious, so she quietly followed them to see what was going on.